Hello. Welcome, everybody, to With Under's Applause, a podcast where two friends get together to discuss the events and ideas shaping our uncertain future. I'm your host, Steve, along with co host, Zach. What's up, bud?
I don't know how to use an SLR camera.
Oh, really?
I'm taking a
I know a
class.
little bit.
I was taking a class for it, and I'm just like, "Oh, I don't know how to adjust all this. And it kept coming out real dark. And I mean, it was dark, so it makes sense. And I was trying not to use the flash. I was like, how do you adjust the ISO on this thing? And I was like, I know, I'll download the manual for this. That will answer my question in no time. It is a 238-page document.
But you learn a lot about actually most of what I know about how to use a camera is just from reading the manual.
Yeah, I think I'm past that point in my life where I can read the manual.
Oh, really?
I just need to watch a video or something like that.
Yeah. Optics has always fascinated me.
Yeah.
I'm still fascinated by it, especially when it comes into rifle scopes for near and far, right?
Yeah.
Fucking fascinates me. And it's a technology that was developed. You might know that was the telescope, right? Galileo or whatever, or was it someone else who developed the lens?
I think it was Galileo. Yeah.
Okay. Or maybe he took someone else's ideas about lenses and applied them in a practical way for the first time.
Maybe not a practical way, but a different way. I don't think anybody had put two lenses. I think everybody I think there were glasses at the time.
Yeah.
But I don't
This
think
shoe the Poodoo, bro. Let's look it up. That's our first question of the internet search of the night. Who invented the optical lens?
Which was invented first? Invented first, the telescope or microscope? I have a feeling it's telescope.
I think it's telescope.
Telescope. 1608. When was the...
All right, we're looking it up now.
Invented.
We're hanging out. We're drinking beer. Learning about optics.
Let's see. Eyeglasses. Earliest known examples of compound microscopes. 1620. The inventor is unknown. And what did we say for Galileo? 1608. Yeah. So telescopes came first, microscopes shortly thereafter. Probably
technologically speaking, they came onto the scene at the same time.
Yeah. There was probably a lot of it going on when we're glasses.
Oh, that was a long time ago. I think
yeah. Well, apparently the Greeks were messing around with stuff. Yeah,
have existed from antiquity, I think.
Yeah, and I think that lenses were used by
spotting,
the Greeks for various
spotting
things.
scope, shit like that.
Yeah. I can't find anything like the date, but
simple magnification, not really fine.
Yeah.
Like you would need for a microscope.
Whoa, dude, check this out.
Sharing screen. And what is this? 3D glasses?
No, double frame eyewear. And so you have a pair of lenses on the fixed frame, and then a pair of lenses on the part that you bring down. So it's like a bifocal, but you just lift up the other thing, so it's not so annoying. Because bifocals are fucking annoying.
That's the one that has a little frosted glass part in it.
Looks like it, yeah.
Yeah, it has a little frosted part.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have no idea because I've had 20/20 vision my whole life.
I will need them.
Yeah.
I'll definitely need them soon. But yeah, didn't really say when they were
fucked up. I worry about it with telephones and computers and shit.
Yeah.
I always try and go out in nature in various lights and look at various distances. I tell the girls to train their eyeballs. So your fucking eyes have muscles too, right? You got to exercise them. So I'm always telling them look at stuff far away and try and focus on details, then scan back and look at it in a more abstract pattern and the light, and then come in and switch immediately to something close, right? And something
yeah. Well, they recommend that. I did a lot of training when I worked at banks because no one else wants to do it. And, despite my stutter as a child, I'm the one who volunteers to talk. And they tell you it's every, I think it's 50 minutes. You're supposed to have 10 minutes where you stare at something further away. And they do recommend stop staring at your screen and stare over your screen for a little while or past it. to strengthen your eyes. So yeah, but here we go. 1268 is the earliest recorded comments of lenses for seeing, but they talk about it earlier.
Oh, so that wasn't that much sooner.
No,
Took
no,
a few
no.
hundred years. I thought it dated back.
Yeah,
I thought it was like prosthetics and other things where we have like evidence
yeah.
that goes like pretty far back.
There's slight evidence. See here, scattered evidence exists for visual aids in Greek and Roman times. So I mean, like in the BC periods, we were probably using them with limited
Okay.
success, I bet, and they were probably very expensive because like grinding a lens is not easy.
Right. And they continue to be very expensive.
Yeah, they have not stopped. That is true.
And optics are expensive too. All right, we have an eclectic show.
Yeah.
It is Shooting the Poodoo, episode 49, I think.
It is, yes.
I got a ride, fucking A.
We're short of the big 5-0 by just one.
Just short of turning 50. It seems like just yesterday we were turning 40.
Yeah.
At any rate, just gonna hit some general election notes and then some interesting ecology stuff. And keep it short and sweet, I think.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to talk about. So the Iowa caucus was earlier this week. There's another election in the near future. Will you look at the schedule?
For when the primary elections are?
Let's talk about it because I've been completely tuned out. I've been grinding barley flour and making lobster pies. And I am in the zone.
Oh yeah, man. I do not pay much attention to this shit. Why is it doing? Man, it's like the internet's getting smart.
All right, Zach's having
boom. I got
difficulties.
it. Now I figured it out. Oh boy, let's see.
It's coming up soon. Anyway, in
New Hampshire is the 23rd.
Okay, so next week, next Tuesday or whatever.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Or whatever that is. Cool. Right. And so the first contest of the presidential nominating season happened, and I don't even know who got second place. You can look it up. I don't care. It doesn't matter. What I found
think it was Nikki Haley.
Yeah, probably. What I thought was really interesting about it was the result and the fact that, like, Trump got a wider margin of victory than the next most recent large margin of victory, which was in 1988.
Yeah.
Like in that, like he's just like smashed it, which winning the Iowa caucus doesn't mean that you win the presidency. And obviously they're doing their damnedest to try and make it illegal for him to run.
Yeah.
But it just shows that they're not going to be able to. And like you're throwing the whole state apparatus at it. And the people are just like, the people are not fucking buying it, right? Like they're not on your side.
I mean, I think they are though. Like you've definitely got about the same mix of people that support it as you do people that voted against him. Like the numbers pretty much track. Like most people who don't like him support it because they don't want to see him again, and people that don't like or do like him don't want it to happen.
Well, I mean,
split that way.
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, you do get people that are like, I just don't think the barrier of evidence is there. We don't like meet the required evidence for it, and I've definitely heard that. Or
for claiming that he was responsible for insurrection.
No, not insurrection. Some of the other stuff, like I think it was Colorado was the first one to ban him, and it was because he owes them money. It's got nothing to do with any like insurrection. It's got
this directly cites
this does.
Was the 14th Amendment, Section 3 or Article 3 or whatever.
Yeah, but I think some of the other ones that have been coming up, don't quote me on Colorado, but some of them have just been like, oh, you ran up a huge bill in our state 4 years ago and never paid it. You're not welcome back.
I see. Oh, no, this is definitely about insurrection, and that's been the primary case that states are making. And so they might have had multiple reasons they were alleging, but one of them was probably insurrection. And the Supreme Court is going to hear the case from Colorado. Mm-hmm. So a judge in Maine paused the order, like basically said you can't start to go forward with him not being on the ballot while the Supreme Court hears that case or whatever and makes a decision.
Yeah.
Because if they make a decision that he can't, then he won't be on any state ballots, right? And I don't think
Yeah.
that's going to fucking happen.
No, but then each individual state could also block him, as far as
No,
my
if not,
understanding of the
not
law
on those
goes.
grounds.
Oh, it would have to be on different grounds, basically. I
I
mean,
mean,
couldn't
I
we
don't.
just say we don't like them?
I don't know. Here's the thing, dude. There is no law except the law that is willing to be enforced. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to
True.
pretend to be a lawyer, but as I understand jurisprudence, it's like it. I don't know. It's just fucking.
I think it's pretty funny that a lot of the people who would be opposed to this are the same people that cite states' rights when it comes to slavery. But when these states are trying to exercise their right to
Oh yeah.
block their favorite orange person, suddenly they're against it. And it's like,
Oh
well,
yeah.
you can't have it both ways. Like
I mean,
either states win or they don't. You can't pick and choose.
yeah. I think my point I was going to make before I got a fucking brain fog or whatever was that like law is only what it's a contract. If people don't agree to both abide by said contract, like it's just rules for playing the game, right? Or rules for
Yeah.
participation. And if you don't want to follow those rules and you're a state entity, like there is really no consequence, right?
Yeah. And even if you're, someone like Donald Trump and you don't follow the rules, like there may be no consequences, because like there are only consequences if people want to enforce the laws against you. Like
And
that's
there's only
why.
consequences when you're not rich.
Yeah,
When you're
and I was
rich,
gonna
there
say,
are no consequences.
that's why, like, a lot of times, you'll hear about like, oh, I got pulled over and the cops just let me off with a warning. And it's like, oh, do you happen to be rich? And like eventually the cops get to know your car and they're like, oh, don't pull that guy over. He can go as fast as he wants because he's famous or rich or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So it's only, and then you had a whole here in Fresno during lockdown, like you had our police department saying we're not going to enforce that.
Yep.
And so everybody just
And
did whatever the hell they wanted.
I do think we have a right to disobey unjust laws.
I mean,
But
that was what the country was founded on. So yes, I would tend to agree.
yeah, it just sucks that a lot of the people who are really willing to fight for laws they think are unjust
Mhm.
are those who don't really seek justice for all.
Yeah, it tends to be that the people who would do well with justice and all that stuff are kind of quiet and don't raise their voices and until it's already too late. And it's kind of like go with the flow until you see that shit's going downhill and then try to stop it. And it's like, no, you have to be proactive about that. You can't just let it start going downhill and hope that you can put on the brakes, because guess what? It's snowing and you can't put on the brakes. They're just not
Right.
going to work.
Right. And so, like, speaking of I think this is kind of one of the more interesting developments I've seen recently. I remember
Mhm.
when Trump first got elected, a friend of mine, he's also an Air Force vet, worked for the federal bureaucracy. So, like, even though I was doing private contract, intimately wed to the federal bureaucracy in
Mhm.
what we did. Because it's an extension of the federal government. It's just fucking private contracting is a grift. Um,
Yeah.
at any rate, he and we kind of share similar politics, tend to be kind of more fiscally conservative, but socially liberal, and not fiscally conservative in like cut welfare, but in the sense of like being skeptical of like government largesse
Yeah.
and large ineffectual bureaucracies, right?
Yeah. Or
Like,
like, hey, why are we making all these, weapons that cost millions of dollars, and like half of them blow up before they reach their target?
or even in the social safety sector, why do we structure food stamps the way we do, as like basically an indirect subsidy to fucking big ag, right? And
Yeah. Right.
big food manufacturing, instead of
Yep.
actually having a functional like a national nutrition program.
Oh, and
You
then
know what
all
I
the
mean?
time that we waste on means-based, testing
Oh yeah,
for any of the
fucking
social
absolutely.
security
The
things
fact
we
that like
have. Yeah.
I'm on private healthcare and then I lost my job. So I'm off private healthcare and now I have to reapply here. And then
It
because
takes a
they don't want to
while.
give me the state healthcare, if I don't absolutely deserve it, then they have people who just call me every 6 months to make sure I still deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Well, and then of course all
and
the
I don't
yeah.
even use it between those times.
Yeah,
Right? Like
and there's a lot of
it
other
comes into
stuff.
play like once every 2 or 3 years, and they have someone fucking call and email you every 6 months.
I mean, I would
Crazy.
say on that line, it should just be that everybody is basically like an open case the day they're born, and you should just get in contact with people all the time. You know, like
It's like,
get ready to get jobs
congratulations for
too.
being born, baby.
I
Sad to tell you, you have a
mean,
terminal illness. It's called you're going to die eventually.
there
We will help you
are
along the way.
yeah, there are countries that are playing around with early childhood investment, and the idea is like you're born and a certain amount of money gets put in an interest bearing account, and then you can access it when you turn 18. And it ain't a
Yeah,
lot. Like I don't think it is ever in excess of like $10,000 to start with, and like
bro, that's called a bar mitzvah.
yeah, but for everyone. It's
Right, but for
it's
everybody.
true. All the religious people get, the best holidays and all that crap, and they get the best
Com-
or
Coming of
presents
age
and whatnot.
ceremonies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Coming of
Here's
age
a stack of
ceremonies.
cash.
Yeah.
Like my roommate, he's like, I don't know. He uses it as his allowance. And once he meets all his expenses, he's like pinching his pennies and smoking all our fucking weed and
Yep.
drinking all our beer so he could save his goddamn bar mitzvah money for fucking comic books.
So it can be a
I love
Jewelorian.
that kid, man. Uh,
Yeah.
I could spend his money on comic books, smoked our weed, and fucking then spend his own money on comic books.
And then played a Mandalorian who did all those same things.
You gotta love him. It's all right. Cool. So, relatedly, moving on from a legal case where basically, to sum up on this, it basically turned out exactly how we talked about it when it first got floated. Well, not yet, right? The Supreme Court has to hear it. Unlikely, but already courts are pushing back, being like, no, you can't really do that. You can't just say this and say, well, it's a feeling and this was orchestrated. He didn't orchestrate it. His fucking
Yeah.
people are crazy, and it's an infrastructure. There is an infrastructure in place, but he's not in control of that.
Yeah.
Like, as much as everybody wants to think that Trump is this like super dangerous person, he's a figurehead for the clear and present danger, which is the fucking movement.
Right.
And that movement is there with or without him. They went to the Capitol with or without him. Sure, his rhetoric says that, but he's not actually controlling those people, right? Because Joe Biden and all of the fucking media and all of Congress wants us to believe that fucking Israel has a right to self-defense.
And
And they're trying to
self-offense.
convince us to be just okay with a fucking genocide,
Yeah.
right? Like, and we're not complying with that. Like, you like, just because your political leadership wants you to do something doesn't mean you're going to do it. Like, those people have to want to do it, and they did
Yeah.
it all on their own. So there's going to be someone who's far more competent than Trump come up, and there's already going to be a strong infrastructure behind it because you took you basically made politics a reality TV show, and he's the guy you're trying to kick off the fucking island. Like, for
Yeah.
fucking real, bro.
No, and it ignores the fact that, why are we like thinking about it as a game to begin with? Like, why are we gamifying the way we live our life? You know.
Because
Uh,
capitalism's a fucking casino, bro.
it really is. Absolutely. Anyone who
It's
invests in something without knowing like everything about a company is gambling. If you have a mutual fund, you're low risk gambling.
yep.
Like everything where you're putting money in and hoping for more, how can you see that as anything other than gambling? You didn't do anything. The company is doing all the work. You're just saying, I agree not to spend this money for now.
Yep. That's why the only time you ever hear me talk about my mortgage,
Hmm.
it's in the context of I can make my mortgage payment under pretty much any circumstances if I'm willing to go out and fucking grind minimum wage. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, a couple people grinding minimum wage could pay for this no problem.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's why I never talk about my house in terms of like my equity and how much wealth I have stored in my house.
Right.
Because I don't. The wealth stored in my house is the ability to keep me and my fucking family warm and dry, and give
Right.
us a place to park our shit and a place to cook our food.
I'm
Right?
just
Like,
amazed how little time it took for people to forget the lessons of the housing crash and not to treat housing like a commodity. And everyone's like, oh,
right?
well, it was all the subprime mortgages' fault, et cetera, et cetera. And like we're going to put these appraisers in between the banks and the buyers. That way, we can make sure the house is actually worth what it's worth. We're going to put in all these rules, and it's like all you did was the same thing with extra steps, because like appraisers work for the banks and they want to come in at that value. So like you just made it more difficult. But what we got now is the same thing. Like people are treating housing like an investment again, and it's gonna end up doing exactly what it did, but for different reasons this time. And it's going to be more along the lines of like, oh, a whole bunch of big businesses like Zillow and Redfin and whatnot bought properties, and now they're selling them off because for them it looks bad on their books at the time. And you
Mhm.
have people like your ma and pa who are buying it up at an inflated value. And will this inflated value last forever, or will it eventually, reach a peak and then bottom out again? And so,
Right.
like, are the boomers going to have two, once in a lifetime housing failures? And it's looking more and
I
more like, yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't tracked it recently. All I know is that when I was tracking it, they were pretty convinced that 2023 was going to start off with a strong adjustment in the housing sector.
Hmm.
And that not only didn't pan out, that business as usual continued all through the calendar year.
Yeah. And now it's ground to a halt, due to the interest rates. Like there's
Hmm.
not as many people
We did know
buying.
that was going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. There's not many people buying, not many people are refinancing, et cetera, et cetera. Back on electoral politics though,
Yeah.
I did have an interesting idea, and I was like trying to figure out if I was the only one who thought of it. I'm not. That's cool, whatever. But hey, Democrats, guess what? If there's a primary in your state, it's not really going to matter. Biden's the guy. They're doing them. Register Republican. Vote for anybody but Trump.
Yeah.
Like, fuck it, man. Fuck with things. If they want to make it a game, let's play a game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think in California, if you're NPP, you can choose the ballot you want to be on.
You have to register as Republican in order to get on the Republican in
Oh, is
California.
that it that way here?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. So I registered Republican.
Did you
I'm gonna,
really?
I'm gonna vote for anybody but him. Yeah.
You're hilarious,
I'm
bro.
actually going to see like who. Well, the thing is, you don't have to win, like take every state away from him. You just have to take some of them.
Yeah.
And so if you can
No,
get,
no, no,
like,
no. So say it goes to, I don't know how the rules are, and sorry to interrupt you, but
that's good.
imagine it goes to a brokered convention. Like,
Hmm.
meaning like no one has a clear majority, or like there's enough demand from various parts of the country for
Hmm.
different candidates that like now they have to be like, well, we're one country, but we're representing three kind of regional factions. How do we negotiate this? Um, and maybe that happens smoothly, and maybe they're just like, no, Trump's a liability. We're not going to put him on the ballot.
Hmm.
If they take him off the ballot, there, like, mark my words, there will be a far right party that emerges that's very web savvy, has all of the fucking dank right wing memes, right? um, and that will emerge, and the Republican Party will essentially be dead. Um, I think that's really the only thing that happens if they keep him off the ballot and he's earned it. Um, whether you agree with that or not, he earned it, right? The only way to fucking beat it is to actually offer an agenda of change that people can gravitate towards, that is not couched in the xenophobia and all that other stuff. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying all Trump supporters are fucking racist, but like you can't deny, that's the thing. Like we can say that there was a fucking that January 6th was a terrible thing without also saying it was like the most coordinated, like dangerous attack on our country, like it was a fucking militia that almost won. Like,
Hmm.
no, it was a bunch of people who were fucking mad and wanted to basically like created their whole identity lifestyle brand
Hmm.
around fucking Trump, because that's what
That
Trump has
really is
been
what it
selling,
is.
is a
That really is.
lifestyle brand.
That's a really good description of it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and everything from hats to socks. Like,
Trump steaks.
yeah,
And the only
yeah,
one still
yeah.
doing that shit is fucking Ivanka. And apparently she's really good at it. And I hope she is.
Doing what?
Just peddling fucking branded stuff like shoes and
Oh,
purses and
I mean, she
perfumes. And
better. I hope she's able to get her own money because he's probably not going to give it to her.
oh no, he loves his daughter, like in a creepy way, actually.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Ivanka. Not yes.
Oh, you were thinking his
Sorry.
wife?
Melania. Yes, yeah, I thought you were talking about
Oh,
me.
no, his daughter.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You're
Oh,
like, "I
yeah.
don't think he's really into her." And I was like,
He
"Oh, he's like, oh, you're talking not about his wife, his daughter. Okay."
Yeah, yeah, okay, never mind, that makes sense.
Fucking
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we live in a fucking carnival, bro. So
He
gotta
can, and he would, and he might have already, so that's all I'll say.
like, seriously, I wrote an essay, a political essay. I couldn't because I guess Facebook fucking lost everybody, or not Facebook, MySpace lost everybody that was ever attached to the program. So they basically could wipe their servers and be like, "Oops, sorry."
Yeah,
Um,
they say that it was a hack.
oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, so
either way, I think they might have just been looking for an opportunity to cut costs.
that's true.
Um, but yeah, no, I had written an essay and I went back looking for it and social media, and Facebook got away rid of their notes as well, which is
Uh,
really kind of, it sucks that there's no repository. You have to have like your own dedicated blog if you want to write anything. I always made my posts try and be more like long form, which is why they've never got a lot of, pushing around. But um any rate, I wrote it one of 2012, I want to say, presidential primary, Republican primary. I mentioned it was like, it seems like every year it gets more absurd. Like eventually it'll like surprise us with its absurdity. And like it was not even fucking a decade later that Trump came onto the scene and all these other fucking clowns. Um but at any rate, we were talking about some shit and we were talking about electoral politics, and now I want to move on to
oh, it was
Texas.
actually
Oh, go ahead, sir.
sorry,
Please.
MySpace. It was a botched server migration, and they
Yeah.
didn't make backups first. Yeah, so it wasn't even a hack. It was their own shot themselves in the foot. All right, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think that they benefited from that in some way, is what I'm saying.
Yes, yes, you could be like, "Oh, it's botched. Oh no,
Oops, sorry.
we lost terabytes of people's data. Whoops."
Not that we're entitled to keep the data if it's on their servers, but
Yeah,
it
I
just
mean,
sucks that there's no
it's
consistency and there's no place for us
yeah,
to do that unless we're doing it ourselves.
you know, interesting thing. Facebook does now have a feature where you can basically download all your data,
Nope, I
and
tried to
so I
use it.
wonder. Oh, it doesn't work.
No, I tried to, because had searched it for a bit trying to figure out how to recover my notes. I had mentioned Facebook got rid of notes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that was the way they said it. It's like you can't access it through the app, but the data's still there. So you have to make a data request through this place. And I said, okay, this is what I want. I made a data request, and
Mhm,
they're like, we'll send you an email. And if you don't respond to the email in 5 days, then like we ignore you
mhm.
unless you make another request.
Yeah.
And I looked for that email. I never saw one. I never got my data.
Mm,
So
poopy.
I think it's just they make a ton of steps to just get fucking people to forget about it.
Yeah, it's probably like in cold storage on a hardware somewhere in a vault, and so they're like, we don't want to fucking get that. And they
No, we don't
only,
want to send someone with a fucking cart down there to pull one machine so we
yeah,
can access a hard drive and pull like a handful of fucking files that person will likely never look
m-
at.
maybe, crushing the actual human worker who's there, the robot whose job it is to, get up to the high places,
That's one
not
thing I
just
really like.
Amazon crushing employees.
Yeah, I really like that in Rogue One, the idea of like that. Yeah, that's the cloud, like that's the server, right? Like it's
Hmm.
like all of there's just these huge banks and these robots you can use to like grab
Yeah.
bits of data. That was fucking, that's such a great movie.
And that really is like how offline data is. It's just massive boxes of hard drives, hopefully
Just
labeled well.
boxes.
Hopefully labeled well.
Yep. All right, cool. So moving on to our next story, because we already burned a
Mhm.
bunch of time.
We
Although it was a great conversation.
did.
I enjoyed
Yes.
that. There's some nuggets in there. There's some nuggets of wisdom. The Biden administration warns it will take action if Texas does not stop blocking federal agents from the U.S. border area.
Mm,
Biden administration said it would refer the case to the Justice Department if Texas state soldiers do not stop blocking Border Patrol agents from a park in Eagle Pass. So I need to step off. Can you read this?
I can summarize. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't ever read word for word.
No, I don't. That's a lot of work. So the Biden administration on Sunday demanded that Texas officials stop preventing federal border agents from entering a section of the U.S. southern border. Apparently, the state National Guard commandeered it last week, calling the actions those actions were called clearly unconstitutional. Um, the Texas National Guard has been ordered to heed the Biden administration's demand and cease blocking Border Patrol's access to a public park in the border town of Eagle Pass. DHS is going to refer it to the Justice Department and see what they can do. And the Texas Attorney General was warned about it. They said that Texas's abrupt move last week to seize control of the park had impeded federal operations to apprehend migrants and rescue those who may be in distress. They talked about how several people drowned. A woman and her two children. I don't know if they're her or children necessarily. A lot of times, family will bring family. Let's see, a whole lot of people outside of the representative who is deploying the National Guard. Said that the National Guard is blocking the attempt to render aid to migrants. The Texas Military Department, which controls the National Guard, said, nope, that's not what we're doing. Two people had already drowned by the time that Border Patrol had requested access, and they didn't say that, no, we haven't blocked people. So, guilty by, lack of admission, I guess. Let's see. Meyer, who works with the federal government, said that Texas's failure to provide access to the border is persisting, even though there's imminent danger to the life and safety of migrants. Let's see. You can see here the Texas National Guard standing watch on the Rio Grande. This is probably a shallower area with perhaps slower moving waters. The wider you have the river, the slower it moves, and it looks pretty wide to me. Let's see. Department of Homeland Security gave Texas until the end of day on Wednesday, which would have been yesterday. So we could probably actually look into this and see. They said if you have not confirmed by end of day, January 17th, then you will cease and desist. Then they will refer the matter to the Department of Justice for appropriate action. So yeah, I think this is a good example of how laws only apply if they can be enforced. And Texas has always been one to say, get the hell out of our house. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
and sorry for cutting you off.
Oh.
No, it just shows you how much room you have. Like, they're like, oh, you better stop interfering with one of our constitutionally. So again, to the people that are like, well, the Constitution is pretty fucking clear
Mm-hmm.
that the U.S. border and immigration policy is its own fucking area of responsibility.
Yeah. And so right there. And people don't care though. So it's just gonna really what it is it's a matter of how far up the chain are people gonna route this. And if it's not a big deal and it doesn't get public attention, it's a lot harder to work against it.
This is the kind of shit again, because this movement, I said, it's not Donald Trump. It's the political movement that propelled him to power and that would do crazy shit, like show up in the bitter, what was it, negative 20 or something degrees in Iowa, and they showed up in much greater number, numbers so fucking great that it beat any record that was ever made by a factor of 3. Right, in terms of how big his margin of victory was. I think it was about 2.5, 3, beating Bob Dole, I think, in 1988.
And that is
If
one
I
thing.
recall the facts correctly. Sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna say that's one thing that the Republicans are really good at is mobilizing their base, whereas Democrats either choose to be bad at it, which I could believe, or are just bad at it.
Well, no, it's because because party elite don't respect their base.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
why
fuck
they
'em then.
fucking their base was behind fucking Bernie.
Yeah. And we didn't get them because fuck us, right?
No, because and not that he was a savior anyway. I think
No.
that in 2016, had we propelled him to victory, he would have had a mandate, and I think he would have had the integrity to stick to said mandate.
Yeah.
But instead, he's like, "Oh, okay, I guess I have to play nice to get along," and then he just fucking gave up. I'm not gave up, like he just kind of fucking started playing the game and said,
Yep.
"Okay, this is the best I can do."
Yeah, basically
Also,
saw the
because he's
writing on
like,
the wall.
young people are going to come out and vote for us because they believe in our agenda, and young people are like, "Whoa!" and they'll drive to a rally and they'll fucking party and shit. And they'll hotbox the car and listen to Fish in the parking lot or whatever, and then go see Bernie talk. And
Specific
then
example.
what's that?
Very specific example.
I don't know. I'm just fucking fabricating this shit on the spot.
I
Anyway,
do
they
that
show up
too
for
in my
that, but
way.
they wouldn't show up when local party elites, right, that control the where they're elected. And I always had a problem with like elected officials, partisan elected officials. They say it's a nonpartisan office, but
Yeah.
those members belong to a party because
And they
there's a
bring with them.
party behind mobilizing people to get them elected.
And they bring their biases with
And
them.
they bring
no
their
matter.
biases, which is what Trump was saying in the case of in Maine or in Colorado, the case that's going to be heard by the Supreme Court. I read part of it, and one of the arguments they make is like, we can provide absolute evidence that this is literally just a partisan attempt to like settle some kind of partisan grievance.
Yeah.
Completely unrelated to like legitimate criminal activity. It's literally just like, we don't like this guy and we need to make sure he loses.
The old witch hunt cry.
Well, yeah, and also like, dude, there's no fucking way Biden can win. Biden can't govern. No one thinks that Biden can govern. Like maybe in 2020, people were like, "Oh God, the pandemic is so scary, and Trump is just so not helpful to settling the national mood." And Joe Biden felt like the better gamble. And then even with some like election shenanigans, right? Like there's always irregularities in our elections. There were in the Democratic primary in 2016. Obviously, if you recall the hanging Chad controversy, they got George W. Bush elected by his brother. The state his brother's in, and his political circle was in charge of that, and the Supreme Court of his father's choosing was in charge. Like, there's no fucking integrity in our election system.
Oh yeah. Well,
So
and
any
then
claim of election integrity is like actually pretty legit, and you can't dismiss it.
yeah, and if you look at it ever since fucking, George Herbert Walker, there's a lot more like attempts at dynasties. Like you had Bill Clinton as president, and then you had Hillary Clinton run. You got Donald Trump now. I can almost guarantee you that like Ivanka's going to run at some point.
Ivanka would be the only one that could win it.
Oh yeah.
I don't think either
people
of
in
his
her
sons
family
are charismatic enough.
No, God, no. So yeah, I mean, like that's gonna happen. You're just gonna have so many dynasties going forward, and it almost seems like the power is now just changing hands between several wealthy and powerful families over a period of decades.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this before, but like, there's and the author's name is slipping my mind, and I still need to finish the book. But their thesis is basically like that the people of means enough to compete in political spaces got too big. Because back in the day, like most people weren't even literate. So the competition for political office was, fairly constrained.
Yeah.
And now, like, it's just so overcrowded that leads to instability in this kind of like idea of one of the causes of civil war.
Yeah.
One of the causes of civil war is that the fucking elite class has too many members vying for a limited number of seats of power.
Yeah, and so then it becomes a zero-sum game where it's your job to hurt, the other the other groups so that you can get ahead, and damn, the people underneath you seems to be the rallying cry. Full speed ahead, I guess.
Yeah. So on this border issue, that just it just shows how yeah, like what you were saying about our conversation about what legal is, and then that comes from me studying international relations, right? Like they always called it an anarchic system. Like the international system is anarchic. There
Yes.
are no rulers. And I'm always like, well, as an anarchist, like I would like to point out that the problem is not that there are no rulers, it's that there are people who want to be rulers, right?
Hmm.
And it's a system that really doesn't lend itself well to absolute rulership. Although when you dig deeper into it, it's not. It's largely a colonial or imperial construct that dominates the world. But where countries are concerned, like ultimately when push comes to shove, groups of people enact violence or nonviolence on behalf of some objective that they have for very specific historical and cultural needs or desires, right? Like,
Hmm.
and so like I don't know, we're yeah, we're at that fucking moment now. And to say it's anarchic is, I think, not necessarily always the best way to put it, but it does make sense in this, in that like the universal maxim is like might makes right, right? Like in the international system, if you are able to exact violence,
Hmm. You
then you
win.
get what you want, right? We were
Yeah.
looking at, what was it, FARC guerrillas and shit. We're like, when did they get brought to the negotiating table? It's like after
Fart
civil
gorillas?
society got, was it FARC?
I don't recognize
We
that term at
discussed
all.
it on our podcast a year ago or so. We were talking about in Colombia, I want to say. Was it FARC? I might have my acronyms fucked up, bro.
It's okay. It's okay.
Put me
Yeah.
on the spot. I think it was in Colombia, but basically, like some guerrilla force that fought for like 20 fucking years eventually got folded into civil society because civil society got fucking tired of fighting them. And they're like, we're not going to stop fighting you until we get what we want. And then finally, they're like, fine, what do you want?
Should have probably asked that question a long time ago.
Well, they were transparent about what they want, just like we're
Uh,
transparent about what we want. But what we want doesn't matter right now because we haven't exacted enough pain on the ruling class and define that in the terms that you want to. I think
yeah, yeah.
economic pain, denying them the ability to extract our labor,
I,
denying
I
them the ability to like, yeah, invest capital in machinery that doesn't get sabotaged, like
yeah.
whatever it is.
I would really like it if people could like. There are some simple things that I think you could do to just fuck with some or fuck with some really big groups of people. Why are you going to the movie theaters anymore? Stop it. You've got a friend who's got a massive TV and you can go over there and watch movies. Have movie nights with your friends again. Drink booze. Stop going to the movie theaters. Let's shut those fuckers down. It's easy. No one needs to go to the movie theater. It costs fucking $15. Another $15 for popcorn and a soda if you're lucky. You just spent $30 for a single person. Maybe 40 if you throw in another person and you share the popcorn and the soda.
Yeah, or you go to one of those ones where
Yeah,
they
it's like a
serve beer
dollar.
and you can get a beer before the show.
Yeah, for like $10 for
Yeah,
like a 12
exactly.
ounce. But my point is though, like that is an industry that we can rob and it wouldn't hurt any of us all that much.
Well, the thing is it's that, I mean, that's a pretty, I don't want to get caught up on it too much because we're almost at time, but like you're right. I think that in it's like there's a lot of synergies and a lot of overlaps, and like the system of oppression is so fucking like it's concentrated. Like we've been on this trajectory of becoming more and more complex and more concentrated, more monopolistic, that now it's so um it's so complex and complicated and so tedious that it's all like about to unravel under its own gravity, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so like movie theaters are a great example because guess what movie theaters generally do? Like they favor monopoly theaters that have large contracts to, and that's why your Tinseltown or whatever, your Cinemark 14
Regal, I
or
think,
12 or
Cinemark are two big
Regal or
brands.
Cinemark or whatever it is,
Yeah.
they don't like have like a lot of indie movies. And guess what they could do?
What could
They
they do?
could pay those people for those indie movies and say, hey, Disney, Marvel, ESPN, Hulu, whatever,
Hmm.
corporate entity, we're not going to like give you exclusive reign. We're not going to give just a few studios exclusivity over what we do because that's not good for our bottom line.
Hmm.
So now we're going to show indie theater because like you have a bunch of dead time anyway. And like movies aren't doing that well. You might as well be like, okay, on Wednesday and Thursday night, we're gonna play like an indie film, and then on Friday, Saturday, we can have our big fucking superhero movie.
I see what you're saying.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, and the
and just
superhero,
diversify quite a bit.
yeah, and that might have to happen because so far the superhero thing is failing last year and this year. Like people just don't seem to be as interested, probably because we've been bombarded with it for the last over a
They
decade
wore
now.
it out, dude.
Yeah, yeah. But like people are tired. And the thing is, like superheroes are supposed to be inspiring and they save us from things, but it's like really obvious that no one's coming to save us. And so I think people are just becoming disillusioned. They're like, oh,
Yeah,
well, it's
it's not
wonderful that,
culturally relevant at the particular moment.
yeah, like it's wonderful that these exist in fiction, but I live in reality and this isn't your reality. And even if it
That's right.
was, you're basically saying might makes right. Like if I had the power of Thor, I could like bring capitalism to its knees.
Bro, 100%, 100%, 100%. It might make straight. It's a fucked up reality, but like it's a reality we have to get to. I was talking to my therapist about fucking permaculture today and that tension I see between like actually envisioning like what future is ahead of us
Mhm.
and strategies of making ourselves and our family and communities resilient in the face of those threats and challenges, right? Versus the kind of woo woo, like we can heal kumbaya, like we can heal the world. Like, I don't think that we can heal the world narrative is relevant anymore. I don't think it is. I think I was telling my therapist, and I've had this conversation with you among other people, but like
Mhm.
we're looking at like I mean, we don't have a ton of life left ahead of us,
Mhm.
but in our lifetime, we're looking at three, maybe 2.5, 3.5 degrees C.
Mhm. Yeah.
And within our kids' lifetime, probably 4.5 or 5 degrees C.
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
eventually the good news is people will start dying and it'll go back down again unless
no, but the
existing people
systems
just keep
have
using more.
delays and systems,
Well,
and
yeah,
there's a
yeah.
big, big fucking delay in that because all that
Yeah.
biomass has to collapse and then
Mhm.
settle into sediment, and then and then it'll be kind of sequestered, and then maybe we'll turn into the energy of the future. We're just feeding
Hopefully
on the dead bodies of humans.
human, maybe human corpses can become fossil fuel, we can sacrifice ourselves,
Are
uh,
we just cannibalizing corpses?
what a great band.
All right, we got one more
Mhm.
article that we'll touch on relatively quickly. And it what a perfect flow. Too bad we're not like more articulate and more like bouncy with our transitions between these because these are all. It's like a really good flow of a conversation. I feel,
Right.
and maybe that's because I'm like just pretty high and working on my
Well,
second
no, I
year.
mean, you could definitely say,
Um,
speaking of increased CO2 levels, ba-dum-bum.
Speaking of that, no, and also speaking of just like might makes right, but also like central planning, right?
Yeah.
Like, and all these other things. Okay, we don't know why the starfish died. I think we know why. I think it's pollution. They're probably less sensitive. We can't really study them that much because there's
Yeah.
no money in being like, let's take some things that we would like to use for industrial processes 20 years from now and let's first examine how they, you know, how starfish react to them when they come into the ocean. No, we just fucking do it, and then we're like, oh shit, all the starfish died. Like let's try and change something so all the starfish aren't dead. Either way, they said it was a disease, but like it could be warming waters and all these other things. Because the fucking biosphere is in crisis.
That
I
happened the
mean,
same thing
all
with
the
king
spheres are in
crabs.
crisis. Sorry, go
Uh,
ahead.
the same thing happened with king crabs up in the Arctic. They just
Mm,
kind of disappeared, and there was like, oh, they might have like been chased out of their normal territories by like
by
changing ocean
invasives, yeah.
conditions. Well, by changing ocean conditions, and
Oh,
then
okay,
might
yeah,
have
yeah.
accidentally gone off of the continental shelf,
Change
like
it temperature or salinity
yeah.
or
And then like most likely what it is we just fish the fuck out of those
yep,
bastards.
yeah, we overfished.
Yeah.
Which is why I want industrial. I talked
I
to
don't
my
know if
friend.
people like king crab so much. Just crab in general. It's so much work.
It is, and if I want that much work, I'll do crawfish, which reproduce a lot faster and in fresh
Mhm.
water.
Yes. And it'll
And so
help
you can
clean the
farm
fresh
them
water
a
for
lot
you.
easier. What's
Oh,
that?
yeah. Oh, and they help to clean fresh water as well. It's just part of
Yeah,
the
they're bottom
ecosystem.
feeders.
Yeah.
Sure, I would feed crawfish to pigs
Here, yeah.
if I had the fucking space and I could design systems I'd really want to experiment with. But you need a lot of money for that, and there's not a lot of money in it. because the people that are trying to do the experimentation also have to derive like a livelihood.
Yeah.
I don't want to say profit. They use the word profit, and I call on everybody that's an entrepreneur or someone who's like working for themselves to stop thinking in terms of like them making a profit, because you're not making a profit. You're
Yeah.
trying to pay yourself a living wage and pay yourself by your work as a consultant, a designer, your wife's whatever, an appraiser, right?
Yeah.
Like you would like to be able to provide a dignified income to yourself, right? Like that's, you're not thinking in terms of like, if I do this many, I'll get this much profit for
No,
who?
no. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
you're thinking about how can I increase my standard of living while balancing I have to do X amount of work to meet my standard of living, and like making that jive in a way that's like fair instead of one that it just exhausts people, right? Like the 60-hour a week kind of grind bullshit.
Hey, my call to action is winning conversation and talking about, the United States as it relates to other countries. Don't say, well, in other developed countries, say in developed countries, because we're not developed anymore.
Yeah. And also, anytime you don't use the word administration, if you say Biden administration, it's not administration, it's regime. The Biden regime.
Gotcha.
Because that's what they do everywhere else that has actually a functioning bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Like even fucking North Korea is not an absolute autocracy. Like
Mhm.
there is a state apparatus. The state apparatus is fucking ancient, especially
Oh, I have to
in
believe.
fucking North Korea and that part of China. Like the state bureaucracy is fucking like 5,000-6,000 years old, right?
And I have to believe that the Kim Jongs know very well that if they, rock the boat too much, that they can be made to disappear.
Oh yeah.
Like no leader is like so high up above. Like
Yeah.
everyone
And it's
talks
a
about how
very
much power.
mountainous region, isn't it? We should also, we're gonna talk about the Houthis Monday.
Yeah,
Perfect segue.
yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off, buddy.
No, no, go
I'm
ahead.
just so
It's fine.
excited.
I'm
We're gonna talk
good
about the
with it.
Houthis, but it's a perfect example of this might makes right, right? Kim Jong-un enemy. Like people are like, oh, you could live in North Korea. I was like, well, I haven't been to North Korea, so I can't tell you I don't absolutely want to live there
I don't
because
speak the
I
language,
get
so
everything through a filter
yeah.
of a media that wants to.
You
We
you could ask
need
Dennis
like,
Rodman.
yeah, or you can just look at U.S. history. We needed a place to drop the bombs, the surplus bombs from World War II. Because if we didn't drop those bombs, then we couldn't justify buying more bombs.
Mm,
And so we went to North Korea and we literally, as the fucking kind of dark joke is that they got bombed to the Stone Age.
yeah.
And that they're like technologically, like they've invested almost everything in their military because that's like existential to them. It's like all of their technology they've had to like get as a military entity. Like they have zero economic or very little economic development, as I understand it, in part because the US bombed the shit out of them.
Right. Yeah. We're to blame for a
And they
lot of
just never
bad
recovered.
shit.
And then you economic sanction.
Yeah.
And if it's a little like remote and maybe not economically important, like there's not coal or iron or copper, like these things that like an industrial society needs, China had no interest in it. If it's just like fucking rice terraces,
Mhm.
right? If it's just a bunch of patty rice, like we can probably get that elsewhere. And you bring it easier. The terrain is such we can build a railroad to bring it instead of fucking bringing it on donkeys or whatever. Which is why southern Mexico is like geography really fucking matters, bro. And like look at
Mhm.
like New Mexico, right? Another state. Yeah, it's oppressed because of fucking indigenous peoples and brown fucking Hispanics or whatever. But like also, it's really hard to get shit in and out.
Yeah.
It's very costly. Whereas if you're like California, like you got a bunch of fucking ports and you have boats coming in and out.
Another one is, the Panama Canal. Like it just happens that that was the thinnest part, and so people were like, "We're doing that," regardless of the geography. And people, I think the original guy who tried like 2 or 3 times, failed, came down with like all kinds of diseases from the mosquitoes in the area and shit like that, and finally had to give up. And it wasn't until like dozens of years later that anybody was finally able to make any headway. Like,
My Uncle Randy says that
shitty geography.
it says that the fucking fee for a sailboat to cross that
Hmm.
is $3,000.
I believe it.
And when you think about what you're doing, like that's kind of a big deal. But really, it's not the distance, because in a sailboat, most people who sail, like their day-to-day expenses were very, very, very low.
Hmm.
And like time is like they have, right? You're not sailing on a boat because you fucking are in a hurry, right? Like
No, but it's incredibly dangerous.
to go around the south. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Cape of whatever the hell it's called.
And that's not the case in the across South Africa, right?
No, also dangerous. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there are some good paths to get around it, but it is still pretty dangerous. The main thing there is the distance, though. It is less dangerous because it's also farther away from Antarctica, and so it doesn't get the extreme weather quite so bad.
I see.
Yeah,
And you go out to those, and that's where you realize that you go out to like Antarctica, like down there, and that's when you realize, like, oh, we live on a planet.
yeah.
It's
Whoops.
not just like we realize, like, wow, all this inhabitable space is a fucking gift.
Hmm. Yeah,
Because we actually live on a planet that's under the under the constraints of an actual, like, the geophysical being.
yeah. Well, and like, there's a lot of shit that like if you don't pay attention to like, I mean, pretty much geology. If you don't pay attention to geology, like you don't know that humankind is like pretty much fucked unless we do some major terraforming. Because like, say we make it through the next, few hundred years, say we make it through the next 1,000 years, say we get to the point where we're living from, like millions of years into the future. Like eventually all the continents are going to come back together, and the simulations are showing that the conditions that would exist, we couldn't, as we exist now, survive in them. And so there would have to be like massive, either evolutionary pressure that would make us change, or we'd have to like take control of our own genes and basically engineer ourselves to survive in this new world. But like, unless we get, make some major shit, like we're not long for the world in geologic terms. And
Yeah.
it's really hard the more that you pay attention to the news and everything, and realize just how close everything is to like one group slipping up and starting a whole chain of shit. Like it's really hard to imagine that it's going to go on for much longer. Like we have the power to destroy ourselves in so many ways now.
We do, and you kind of were bringing up like, oh, if it was a million years from now, we could genetically engineer ourselves. And then I was thinking like the engineers from fucking Prometheus or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, right, okay, cool. And I was like, and guess what? We would not remember, and that's really kind of like one of the central themes of this, of my take
Mm.
on our uncertain future,
Hmm.
is that like we won't remember, like no,
Oh, the lessons.
yeah, exactly. Like I always say, like they're like, oh, we're stressing out, what do I get the kid for their 8-year-old birthday? I was like, they won't remember.
Hmm.
Like I don't, like I'm gonna take them out to a nice meal because I
Hmm.
want to go to a nice meal, and I think that they would enjoy themselves at a nice meal,
Yeah.
and like it would be something we can talk about for the next few weeks. But when they're celebrating their 21st birthday with their friends,
Hmm.
right? Going out to their first bar crawl or whatever. Like, they're not going to remember that we had fucking dumplings on our 8th birthday. They're not going to remember the gift
Yeah.
that you gave them.
You'll be lucky if they remember the place they went or anything about it, because like your early childhood tends to slip away pretty quickly if you
I,
don't think about it
yep,
or
I
constantly.
remember some very specific things, not all of them traumatic.
Yeah.
And
Good
that's
for you.
good.
Good for you.
Yeah, not all of them traumatic, but very few, a select things, right? I remember studying for a spelling bee. I don't remember participating in the spelling bee. I
Mm.
remember sitting with my mom around a fire, like practicing words.
Hmm.
And I remember the scene. I remember the dogs. I remember how fucking dirty and dusty the yard was. I remember how it fucking smelled like fucking dog shit and piss. Because there was like 6 dogs on this like fucking not that big of a backyard. and other details. But like, like I don't really remember. I don't remember the spelling bee. I don't remember what the words were. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It was just kind of this like one distinct memory of all my senses aligned. Boom! It's a snapshot. I remember the house and the general orientation, but I couldn't tell you. I could probably draw like a really rough map right now, but I couldn't really like do any detail.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So at any rate, like, I don't think that remembering it's one of those things that like the whole point in a legacy is that like you're remembered. And my point is like to be fucking really terribly fucking nerdy and kind of like, I don't know, cliche or gross at the same time. Is I gotta remember what fucking Kylo Ren said, man. Kill the fucking forget the past, kill it if you have to. And I
Hmm.
think that's the only way we can move forward,
It's
honestly.
probably the best line in all of the three
It's a great
sequel,
line. It's like,
sequel
forget the
movies.
past, kill it if you have to. And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, that is fucking deep, bro. That's real deep, man. All right. What else we got? So we're killing urchins. So this is, what do we
Yeah.
call this? Smashing urchins?
Yeah, it's a great one.
We're running a little late.
Just says
That's
divers
fine.
armed with hammers spark hope in efforts to save kelp forest. It's ecologically sanctioned mayhem. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday.
Someday. So
Uh,
anyway, we don't have to
yeah.
read the whole article. I thought it
No,
was
no, no.
really
I can.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I can
So to
summarize pretty quick, but
summarize it quickly, uh, starfish. I mentioned starfish earlier.
mhm,
Starfish died because of a disease or some other reason. Environmental change, basically. I'm going to say not a
yeah,
disease because that makes it sound it's natural and unexplainable. It's like no, we've done a lot to fucking fuck with them. They may not be as resilient as we would hope they would be. They might be a pretty sensitive species that was sitting in a really sweet niche,
if
right?
dissolved oxygen changes very much, a lot of things in the water die.
Yep, exactly. So anyway, this starfish, the primary predator of is it purple sea urchin is the name?
Purple sea urchin, yeah.
Yeah,
Or
the
sorry,
primary
yeah.
predator of the purple sea urchin died off, and the sea urchin population exploded, as is apt to do in ecology.
As
So
we've
we're
seen
living
with the wolves in
yeah,
Yellowstone and
predator
all,
prey
yeah.
relationships and population dynamics and population stabilization through predator prey relationships. And all these are really awesome ecological concepts that human beings can't quite understand because we just punch a deeper straw into the fucking aquifer and we pave over more land. I told you that Valley's Edge was like 350 acres, I might have said on here.
I
No,
believe
it's
that, yeah.
1,500 fucking acres. I got
Okay.
a sign to put up in my yard tomorrow. I got it a couple days ago.
So they're basically going down and smashing sea urchins with hammers, and
Yes.
some critics of the practice worry that crushing the urchins could spread their eggs, worsening the problem. uh,
Which is true.
yeah, however,
Absolutely 100%
however, the
true.
experts say that they have seen no instances of that happening. What I don't get is like, why don't you just take a bag with you? Like, it's really hard to hit stuff underwater. Just take a bag, stuff them in the bag, sell them.
No, you have to break them off the rock.
Oh, you can't just
No, yeah,
rip them.
most tidal creatures fucking are able to fucking grip on rock because they're used to getting fucking hit by
Uh,
waves and shit.
see, do gotta. Well, then bring a chisel.
Yeah, and they go and the part of they fucking eat the kelp forest. So they like
Yeah,
bite them off at the ground and then it kills the fucking kelp.
yeah,
Like, they bite them off where they're rooted.
yep. It's just like they're like
And
yeah,
that affects
caterpillars
fucking
of,
seals,
of the
bro.
ocean.
Because seals like hide their pups
Yeah,
in these
from
kelp forests
yep.
so that like when a predator like a shark or something comes around or a whale that's looking to eat a fucking a sea lion pup, they can't find him because the kelp's too thick.
Yeah.
And then these things are killing the kelp and like exposing everything. And then I heard that, I think I might have told that story here on the podcast before, but I went crab fishing with a guy from my role playing group in Delaware, and his dad was a retired crab fisherman, but he basically, because I was just talking to him because I was curious, and I'm always interested in ecological realities and people's occupations and like especially tapping into the knowledge of someone who like might have been in an extractive industry, but like also knows the ecology of that thing that it was dependent on for its livelihood, right? Better than I could read in a book, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and he's like, herbicide, man. He's like, they sold a bunch of these properties off to developers that built these like, 5-acre mini estates with these big ass houses and they spray fucking herbicide on the lawn to keep the fucking the dandelions down.
Yeah. Which is
They
silly
don't want to
because
poison
dandelions
the
are gorgeous.
fucking turf, and they pour that, and guess what it does? It kills all the little shallow water broadleaf plants that the fucking Maryland blue crab was using as its fucking nurseries. Because in blue crabs, their crustaceans are like other, like, I don't know, invertebrates, in the sense that they have to like have a safe place to get rid of their armor before they can grow new armor. So
Yeah,
there's always
molting.
like a period of time that they're shedding, and they need the extra protection. And there weren't these shallow grasses, freshwater grasses, because people on the hill above the water who wanted a lakeside villa were fucking spraying broadleaf herbicide on their fucking lawns.
Yeah.
And guess what? When it comes to, it's like, oh, it's like meat eaters are killing. Look, there's no crabs left because meat eaters. And it's like, no, it's all the fucking rich people in their goddamn grass. So go fucking like bolt yourself to their fucking luxury SUV, please. Like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Because the reality is that the planet is being murdered, and they have addresses, and those addresses are to luxury fucking villas on the Chesapeake Bay. They're killing the Maryland blue crab because they want a lawn to look at the fucking 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 days they spend there every summer. It's not their primary residence. It's their vacation home. But they want it to have a lawn because, I don't know, because the nicer your lawn, the more you spend on it. It's literally conspicuous consumption. It goes back to fucking Veblen's fucking thesis, right? The theory of the leisure class. You're spending money on something just to show you have money.
Yep.
So let's expropriate them of their money, or at least at the bare minimum pass a law that they're not allowed to fucking grow lawns. You're not allowed to use chemicals to maintain a lawn.
I go one step further.
When Dow Industrial takes a fucking 25-cent fucking, hit on their stock price, then Congress is going to have to fucking eat that. Because the rest of us have no fucking stake in the future of that company. In fact, the future of that company is only hurting us by keeping us corralled to a fucking system that doesn't apply, to a worldview that does no longer holds. And with that, we like to remind you, smash your fucking smashing sea urchins. Smash sea urchins like you do the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you.
They're somewhere. Probably
Remember,
right.
When liberty dies, it dies.
With thunderous applause.
Smashing of sea urchins.
Thunderous smashing of crab claws.
Crab
people. Look like crab. Taste like people.
Grogu.